to start with some trivia questions since we have free swag. Okay, so true or false? Boba Guys started in the back of a ramen shop.
True.
Wait, raise your hand, please. Anyone know the answer?
I'm guessing true.
Do you want a Boba Bay shirt or a hat? Boba Bay? A hat?
I'll take the Boba Bay.
Okay, yes.
Oh.
Andrew, what is Boba Bay, by the way?
Boba Bay, believe it or not, was started before the Salt Bay guy came out, this guy. And we were just wanting to call our fans something. So we didn't really have an idea. You know, the Swifties have something. You know, the Gaga has her Little Monsters. We just didn't have a term to call our fans.
Cool. And it applies both genders?
Both genders, yeah. I mean, there's Salt Bay is a dude. And then, and most of the times, if you guys don't know, for anybody who doesn't know, Bay is generally called before anyone else. So it's just in a term of endearment. It's like babe. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Next question. Boba Guys has 12 locations or 17 locations? Yes. Correct. I don't know if I can throw that far, but.
Oh.
So, really excited, Andrew, to have you here today. So, I want to start by talking about culture, since I know that's a core part of the Boba Guys mission in terms of bringing together and bridging the East culture with the Western culture, Eastern with Western. How do you think the perception of Boba has changed in the US over the last few years, and what has Boba Guys done to help change perception around Boba?
Yeah. I'm going to assume everybody in this room knows what Boba is, right? So I don't have to gloss through that. Okay, great. So I think, 30 years ago, when Boba really came out, it came out in Taiwan, and the first Boba I had was in Wonderful Foods in San Francisco. So if you guys are from the city, there was this place on Irving, shout out to them. They're like the OG place. And I just knew it was kind of an Asian teenager drink. Most of the people were either parents and their children. And so when I grew up, I went to school right around here, and I volunteered at Oasis across the street from here when I was at Cal. And Boba, I went to Sweethearts, and it was still more of an Asian college drink. And I think when we were thinking about the idea for Boba Guys, this is 2010, I was in grad school, and I was in this place in Shanghai called Xintiandi, which is like this expat area. And my uncle lives kind of above it, and we're looking down, and there used to be a Haagen-Dazs there. And I was like, how are all these Asian people eating ice cream? Because I always thought the stereotype was lactose intolerant or something, right? So I was like, I don't get it. And so he's like, Zai Zai. He calls me Zai Zai. He's like, Andrew, we love anything American, and one day it's going to be flipped. Except that the Asian people don't really know how to speak consumer-wise, brand-wise to the American culture, and that's really what jogged my head. And most people know my background was I was in brand management. I went to business school for that. I was going to be hopefully maybe CMO of Coca-Cola. I have different language skills. I have good pedigree, so that was really my track. And then I said, well, as a side project, let's see if we can make Boba cool and accessible. Blue Bottle and Phil's Coffee were really popping off during this time. And I said, what if we blue bottled Boba Guys? And because I'm from the Bay, I saw Blue Bottle blow up at the Ferry Building at the time. And I said, I bet you this could happen. And I was a marketer by training. So I said, well, it's just a brand problem. Because people have said, how come you didn't do it? Nobody's ever done it before. And I said, and this is a little cocky, and I apologize if it sounds that way, because that's not very Asian. But I was just confident. I was like, it's because there hasn't been a good marketer for it. And I think in the last 9 years, we've started 2011. Most people will say that we essentially started the revolution. We started the Boba Guys in the Mission District. We chose that district for a very specific reason. And we made Boba accessible because I think Boba, just like Starbucks has taken over Asia with coffee, and that's a continent of tea, right? I think Boba, the problem was it was always othered. It was always, the story was never told, and it was always made very exotic. And I think we saw some trends going our way that we were like, hey, could Boba just be more accessible to people? Just like movies becoming popular, just like fashion I'm seeing that are Asian influenced. How come we can't go the other way? And so that's why we started Boba Guys. And I mean, we have a book coming out. I'm a Penguin Random House author. So that comes out. It's a #1 pre-order in our category for sure. We're like, thank you guys for anybody who's pre-ordered it. I think we're really going to change the game. I mean, when we go on a late night show teaching certain people to make boba, that changes the way boba's seen forever. I mean, we already work with Alexander Wang, 88 Rising, Bape. We have our own collab deals. We're I guess, fashion influencers. So we always have to wear like fashion stuff. That's never been done in the boba category, but it's done in coffee, it's done in tea, it's done in smoothies, done in kombucha, done in certain matcha categories. But they've never done it with boba because they thought it was a kid's drink. And I think our whole goal is to kind of make it accessible. And that's the key to bridging cultures. Whether you're in tech, you're in VC, but you have to dispel a lot of rumors of what that culture is, right? You know, especially if you're a woman, because that's not stereotypical. And so how do you break barriers there? And it's the same with us. It's like boba is not stereotypically located next to a blue bottle. So I, behind the scenes, had to convince, and this is in not derogatory way at all, I had to convince a lot of white landlords, like why a blue bottle and a boba guys belong next to each other. Because they would never let us do that, right? Imagine if you wanted to put a boba guys next to a blue bottle. A landlord wouldn't let that happen because they just said, that's not your crowd. You'll lose money. It's not who I want. And we made it okay now. And because of us, most people will say we kind of changed the landscape for real estate. That's really what I don't think the public really knows is I fought so much for the real estate play for boba guys. So if it's not us, it's at least another high-end boba shop that can now change the culture. Or even suppliers. Tomorrow's fancy food show in the city, I can't tell you I changed the whole supply chain because we had to convince suppliers to carry bamboo straws. That was boba guys. Single-handedly, we changed the whole the straw game because we wrote the legislation. But we helped write the legislation, yet we also provided the solution for it because everybody thought we're going to use paper straws, right? But most people know right when it launched, the bill came on July 1st, we had the solution ready. It was because we've been working on it. And if you're American, you kind of are in a bubble. But if you go overseas, that technology has existed forever. That's why Asia, people call this the Asia century. So I'm here. If you're not Asian, it's okay. You know, I lived in American century, bridging cultures. I could see you guys. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to make it so the world's more global. I'm a globalist. So I'm not like all about Asian stuff. I'm just into just culture.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about competitors in terms of, you mentioned Blue Bottle, Starbucks, for instance, and I very much see boba guys not as competing with other boba drink stores, but rather juice and coffee stores. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how you see boba guys fitting within the broader beverage store ecosystem?
Yeah. For this one, I'm going to go, if you guys hear me ever do interviews and talks, and you'll see a lot of this, and we have a show coming out. And it's like, I use Taylor Swift as kind of the example because she was like super big she was a country artist. And then she crossed over and now she's like one of the biggest pop stars in the world. Or I take an artist like Kanye, who's controversial, but the sounds he brings in, like this old school sound and using human voices to make music. And Bruno Mars, who's really good at bringing throwback stuff. And they're always a tribute to kind of where they get their inspiration from. I think it's no different from Boba Guys. So Boba Guys was more like, you know, Taylor Swift probably was not getting her inspiration from country artists, right? When she was crossing over, that was not where she was learning from. Kanye was not learning from too much of the pure, you know, he was making beats for everyone, but he wasn't fully like immersing himself in the current culture of hip hop or pop. And I think he's looking at the past or the future or other cultures. And I think it's the same way with Boba Guys. I don't ever look, and that this is in no, you know, shade to the industry of boba. It's just like, if I look at boba and see what's happening there, I think we would set the whole industry back. And most people think we're like the main leaders and pioneers across the world because we do so much worldwide media. We're opening in Japan. And so when we do TV shows or talks in the book, we almost have to say, you know, coffee is kind of the target. And so if there's one thing that I would say here is like, Boba Guys is really a coffee competitor. Most of the coffee shops are more scared of us than the actual boba shops. Because the boba shops, our price points just don't even match. But you pay a $5, $6 blue bottle, you know, and a strawberry matcha latte at Boba Guys. I think those are generally competitive. And we're next to 3 or 4 blue bottles and fills. And I know the owners and the founders of those places. And they generally will say Boba Guys is more of the legitimate threat nowadays than the next La Colombe or, you know, hot coffee shop.
Mm-hmm. So I guess taking that a little bit further in terms of, I see the comparison with Blue Bottle in terms of, for Boba Guys, it's really about high quality, artisanal Boba. And then just wondering on the Starbucks front. So one of the philosophies of Starbucks, as you probably know, when they first started was this concept of being a third space.
Mm-hmm.
So your first space is the home, second space is work, and then very much the third space is the place when you want to escape home, escape work, and it's right at the corner. And growing up, I remember going to boba shops and I'll see people just playing card games there or like dominoes, and they're drinking their boba. They're spending hours there, very much like the third space concept. And do you feel like that's something important to embrace at Boba Guys? Or obviously the approach has been a little bit different in terms of Starbucks has really taken that third space concept to an extreme where the majority of the land space of a Starbucks is sofas, coffee tables, and whatnot as a result. So
it's a good question. I don't want to get too like food and beverage nerdy with you guys because I know we're here, especially with the talk of Imagine Talks. And first of all, thank you guys for having me. I spoke at several Imagine Talk events before, and I really want to go back to the theme of whether it's like, in this case, empowerment today or bridging cultures, because I think they're actually one and the same. So for us, when we built our spaces, people don't realize this. If you guys kind of know my background, I'm really nerdy. I'm really, really nerdy. And I think about everything. I'm too neurotic. And so I look at like European architecture, where if you notice our upcoming stores, we already have one of them, like San Ramon. We use stadium seating. But our stadium seating, which is when it's tiered seating and there's no tables, they're all pointing inwards at each other. That's just like a piazza in like Europe, in like Italy or France. And you're going to see this in our North Hollywood store. You're going to see this in our Burlingame store. Oh, that's an exclusive. We're announcing Burlingame. That's why my co-founder is not here. He always says like, man, you are really hard to control for a publicist. But my publicist isn't here anyways. So at the end of the day, we are building our stores for dialogue. So our mission is to bridge cultures. So dialogue is the way to bridge cultures. Most people know I got some flack because I'm not into cancel culture. So I purposely kind of like try to get canceled to essentially prove like the nuance is where society needs to go, not this whole extremism, which I think both sides are a big part of. And so when we build stores, we actually build stores that create conducive conversations. Are conducive to conversation. So we have table topics in almost all our stores where you just pick questions while you're waiting in line because we have long lines. We have these lookbooks that are like fashion lookbooks because we come from the fashion industry. So in those cases, we have people while they're waiting converse with each other. And that's what the goal of all our stores are. Because the future of retail is essentially going to change, right? The future of retail is going to look less about the fashion stores. And there's these mixed use concepts. I do a lot of talk about what's the future of retail, what's the future of small business. If you look at a strip that all those boutiques, the clothing stores are closing, they're getting replaced by generally food and beverage and gyms and experience-based businesses. So the retail that's thriving, like Everlane or Glossier, they have these mixed media kind of concepts. And Nespresso, like banks turning into a coffee shop, right? So you're going to see a lot more of that in our industry. And I think that's just culture. That's just literally making yourself accessible. And if it comes to any marginalized group or any group that's underrepresented, in this case, tonight, whether it's women in certain places or it's Asians in certain arenas like Hollywood, it's always about punching up. So how do you punch up? And anybody can identify with that. And punching up is almost always about making sure that you assert yourself and you have power, but you also understand who currently has power because they're not going to let it go right away. So they're going to have to fight. And the only way you're going to be able to kind of slowly take the power away is you have to create this dialogue and you have to get them on your side. And a lot of people call it allyship. And I think we're super into allyship. So I don't want the coffee shops and these neighborhood places. Like when we opened in San Carlos, I know they were like super scared of what we were because they heard about us in the city. And that was our first suburban store. If you guys know San Carlos on Laurel, we dominate that street. We have lines out the door. Palo Alto and Town and Country, that's an hour wait. And I'm sure I know the landlords, they didn't know what we were. They didn't get why we were going there. And we had to convince them that, we're not a threat to the Pete's across the street. We're not a threat to the tin pot creamery because they think we're a dessert too. And we're just our own thing. And I think everybody wins if we could pull more traffic away from, in this case, Stanford Shopping Mall. And if you guys go to Palo Alto, I think that's true. I mean, no other thing in that entire complex, unless your Trader Joe's, has an hour wait. So But I love those. They're cheap pitas. So I think at the end of the day, I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it accessible so nobody fully feels threatened.
Mm-hmm. With some of these changes in retail in the food and beverage industry, where do you see Boba Guys 10 years from now? What's the ideal dream, the vision 10 years from now?
That is probably the hardest question I ever get. And I don't know. I think the one thing that people don't know is Boba Guys was an accident. Like, people are always like, oh, Andrew, you're always doing these like business founder talks. And I do because I like talking about culture. But any question that's related to like, you're a VC, right? You're like, what's the exit? And we're not VC backed. We took $1 million in angel rounds, but we're wholly owned. So we own everything. So there's a lot of Asian people in the room. Like, if you do the math, we're worth roughly on paper, like $50-60 million, owned by 2 people. That's why Ben and I can't do interviews. We can't be in the same room. Something happens, you have a legal entity that just, the key money insurance is just ridiculous. So it's called key man clause. So it's never really been done. I don't know if you guys know this. Like, think about it. In-N-Out took 40 years. And there's that one, the daughter who's left because her dad and her brothers died in the plane crash, I think. That's like one of the only examples in which you have that. But Boba Guys, you have essentially the next blue bottle, 96% owned by 2 guys, only 2 people on the board. So now when people ask us, what are you going to do with it? The best answer we have is like, I don't know, because it fell into our lap. The only thing I know is we want to change culture. I probably won't stop Boba Guys until Boba is normal for everybody in America. I think we want to make sure that people have dialogue. That's kind of like the mission. So if Boba Guys is transforming into a larger food group, because we have a restaurant group now. If you've been to Asian Art Museum, that's our Sunday hospitality group with Dookie Hong, who's, one of people's sexiest chef alive. He's single, by the way. I think that's why we have a restaurant group with Dookie, and that's why we have a bakery that we just started, or a nonprofit that we do where we job train in the Bayview. So right now, I don't really think I don't know what an exit looks like. I definitely don't want to sell. I've seen what happened to La Boulange when Starbucks ripped it up. I come from your world. In business school, I did venture capital. I was a fellow. So I thought I was going to be a VC. So I think like a VC sometimes. And I just don't have a good answer, which VCs they hate, which is why I also don't like talk to them. People are always like, oh, Boba Guys, we can make you the next IPO. And I'm like, I don't really think of it that way. I'm like, will you help me make Boba normal? Will you help me make Boba cool? So, like kids that are non-Asian in Arkansas are drinking Boba and they're going to think it's normal to them. If you help me do that, then great. I rarely meet a VC that talks to me that way. So I haven't taken money for a reason.
Mm-hmm. So taking a step back, what was the biggest challenge you faced for Boba Guys in 2019, as well as since starting the company?
You're asking all good VC questions. That's
I am?
VC.
Okay.
I think the biggest challenge was we're transitioning. I think Boba Guys used to be like the new kid on the block, and for 8 years we were kind of like the underdog. And I do know, because I see every boba shop and coffee shops, whether they clone us, like I'm into Apple, Nike, all the top places get cloned. So I totally get it. Blue Bottle. So it's flattering, but I do know everyone's targeting us. I do know, I can't even say which giant coffee shops. A lot of them are looking at boba, grass jelly, coffee jelly. And because I speak so much in the industry, I'm at these conferences, and I'm usually one of the trend speakers, because I can see trends pretty well. I know those Starbucks innovation people are like, oh my God, like let me take notes. And a couple of them are ex-Clorox, which is where I worked, and I know them. And when I see them like my Facebook, sometimes I'm like, oh shit, like I forgot my friend who's on innovation at Starbucks sees my posts. So it's like a 2-week leak. So they got 2 weeks before the public knows. And I think, I just don't. I think a lot of it is just transition. I think personnel transition is huge. Like for anybody who can relate, if you're small business owners, I know we have them here. Even if you're if you're a creative, you're still an entrepreneur. And if you're an entrepreneur, there's a time where you're struggling, you're hustling, you're an indie, and then you make the system. And then Boba Guys, we have endorsement deals, and I have an agent, I have a manager, we have a show. So now I have to talk different. My publicist is always like, oh, you drop a lot of F-bombs. Like, what about the kids? And I'm like, I don't fucking care. It's just how I talk. And so it's probably why I didn't stay in corporate after a while. But at the end of the day, it was always about like this transition. And then, the team might say, my team who's been with us for the first 8 years, some of them are like it's too rules-based. And I'm like, compared to Clorox and other big organizations, I'm not. But yes, we probably have more procedures than we've had when we first started. And I think, I don't know if Ben and my co-founder and I have changed. Those, Patrick, who's going to come up next, and Tammy, who know me really well. I have some really good friends here. Like, I don't think my core has changed, but I do think like the way I talk and the way I project is slightly different because I do now know there's more people looking at us. That's for better or worse. I mean, you have to dress differently slightly. Like, I just can't get invited to a certain party now, but I need to know to do that because I have to talk to a landlord. And I have to change the way I dress because I can't dress so casually as before. Things like that, I gotta really, it's called code switching. I have to code switch a lot now.
Mm-hmm. So you alluded to some marketing deals. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Since obviously you've spent a lot of time focusing Boba Guys in terms of being more a part of culture, partnering with celebrities. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I get asked a lot of, especially in these like kind of culture conferences, like food especially. I don't know if you know, like, I know Starbucks did something with Ariana Grande, right? And that I don't know if it did that well because nobody really drank it, you could tell. And, but we were one of the first, if not the first, one of the bigger brands, like mid-sized companies to start doing really big content deals. Because again, we came from that world. So we worked with, last year was Alexander Wang, and then we worked with Bape, and then we're working with Nike a lot. And so I kind of have to wear their gear. Although I love Nike, just do it. And then a Hill City. Somebody said I'm a Hill City ambassador. And so when we do that, a lot of it's about culture. When we work with 88 Rising, our friends who run 88 Rising, we were about making boba. So it was cool because they also, their music, if you know their artists, they bridge cultures with their music. They're bringing Asian artists from Indonesia and China and making that rappers, and every rapper wants to collaborate with Rich Brian and Joji and Nicki. And I think that's what Sean, who's the founder, he's a genius for that. And I look up to him. I look up to Wang, Alexander, Alex, he's been a huge proponent of everything we've done. And seeing his fashion being worn by Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, it's the same way, right? Like certain prints that were Asian inspired, and I think that's where we want to do more and more of that. And it's all in the vein of creating culture. Because again, when Americans especially think, this rise of China and this impending kind of cultural war, I think it's us in this room that's really going to be the brokers of kind of the new culture. We're the third culture, right? Like, especially even if you're non-Asian ethnic wise, you're in the Bay Area. So you're by de facto, you're really cool with Asian stuff. You're in Oakland, Chinatown as we speak. And you're going to know about Xiaolongbao more than an average person in like Iowa is going to know. And I think that's really why we do fashion's the same way. I'm just talking about food, but fashion, music, we're trying to make this cultural. And you're going to see a lot of our design DNA change where we're adding a lot more chinoiserie and these kind of like old school Asian stuff that's kind of bringing back. In the 30s, remember, Shanghai jazz was huge. Americans would always go to Shanghai and love the Shanghai jazz influence. And we forget that now because everybody thinks it's exotic, but Asians created a lot of culture in the world before the colonists took over. Just kidding.
Okay, we're going to end with a quick lightning round. So I'm going to give you two options, and you can only pick one of the two. Don't give a third or a fourth or a fifth option. Okay, 49ers or Packers?
Oh, 49ers. Come on, go Niners.
Okay.
Although I did go to school with Aaron, and he's a homie. I would say, I remember he's the smartest athlete, I think, around, Aaron Rodgers. I love Aaron. It's on record, though. I got to go for the Niners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lightning round, remember. Just one word answer.
Okay.
Book or movie?
Movie.
Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders?
Oh, Yang Gang. Yeah, sorry.
Snapchat or Instagram?
IG, Instagram.
Classic black or strawberry matcha latte?
Oh, I'm basic, so classic black.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, guys.